Welcome to today's episode. We have a very exciting guest. For those who are just joining the podcast, this podcast episode is sponsored by Her Digital, specializing in helping SaaS teams build predictable sales engines. So if you want to learn how to take your business to the next level, make sure you stick around. And if you're interested in a free growth consultation, please drop us the word growth in the DMs. Today's conversation is with Dan Koukol, founder of Digit Software. In this episode, we unpack Dan's journey into building Digit, how his role has evolved as the company has grown, and the leadership decisions that have come along with scaling a SaaS business. So Dan, welcome aboard.
Yeah, thank you, Jenny, so much for having me. Really looking forward to the conversation.
Guys, before we get into Digit, I'd love to go back a few steps. What were you doing professionally before starting Digit, and what early experiences really shaped how you think about leadership today?
Yeah, great question. So before Digit, really did two things in my career. The first 9 or 10 years, I would say, I was a consultant here in the US. So the consulting journey started with the nickname Data Dan that we can get into here in a little bit, but ultimately started working with manufacturers and distributors, helping them do big data projects, implement software, do shop floor consulting, and then work my way from, just manufacturing and supply chain centered consulting into consulting for finance, sales, marketing, strategy, and the like. Over that period, worked with about 83 companies, small, mid-market, enterprise, anything from Fortune 500 CPG to heavy duty automotive, all the way down to mom and pop shops and saw pretty much everything. After the consulting period, I actually took over as CEO for a manufacturing business, a disc golf company, so plastic injection molding. Was there for a little under 2 years and had an awesome time sitting on the other side of the table, not as a consultant or trusted advisor, but as an operator, which was awesome experience for me.
Did you feel like it was a bit more valuable to sit on the other side of the table as a founder or someone of influence made a bigger impact versus being a consultant or an outside perspective providing advice?
Yeah, I think both were equally valuable, which I think is just very, I'm very fortunate and lucky to have sat on both sides of the table. So on the consulting side, what was extremely advantageous now that I look back on it was the pure exposure to different verticals within manufacturing. So I touched all 18 of the sub verticals: pharma, food and bev, chemical, you name it. And I also saw different life sizes or life cycles, different leadership teams. And so I really just had this exposure to all of these companies and what they did and how it worked. Pairing that with the actual operating experience was key, because on the operating side, you're no longer a trusted advisor. You are making the decision. You are reviewing the financials. The buck really does stop with you. And so there's a whole level of responsibility and ownership that you just cannot replicate as a service provider, as a consultant. Leadership, building culture, like a lot of these things just carried a different weight. And so the blend of the two together has been excellent in terms of the lessons provided. And I would weight them pretty close to 50-50 looking back on impact now to, where I'm at professionally.
It's a pretty unique experience, Dan. I mean, not a lot of people sit on the other side of the table. They start off on one side and remain on one side. And it gives you a different perspective starting off on the opposite side of the table. But I think that's really unique, and it really builds to your experiences when it becomes to making those hard decisions, which we'll unpack through very shortly. So Dan, can you share a bit about your role now and how it fits into the bigger picture at Digit? What does a typical day look like for you at this stage of the business now that you are making those hard decisions?
Yeah, the short answer is that typical day is always something a little bit different, which I personally like, but I know will evolve over time. So I think starting back to, day one of the business, I founded Digit in a Panera Bread, at a booth at a Panera Bread in Dalton, Georgia, and was eating all of the chocolate chip bagels and all that, and started the company. And so jobs there were build a team, get an early MVP product out to market, raise some initial funds, all of that. And so, that was several years ago. Now we've graduated into a full-time team. And my role has shifted more from a set up those early pieces, and now still being a little bit of an individual contributor on a lot of fronts. So sales, product, customer success, finance, fundraising. My role as CEO is kind of sitting on top of all of that and helping provide additional resources to our amazing team. And the day-to-day of that is always a little bit different. So if we're in fundraising season, then a lot of it is heavily weighted to talking to investors, finding value fits there, making sure that we can get the capital we need to get to our next phase of business. If it's going into sales and customer success, it's, hunting and closing and getting on calls and traveling to places. And, we're very passionate about showing up and being on site. One of the things we talk about a lot is our desk on the floor philosophy, which we can get into a little bit later. And so it might be doing some of that. And then other places, it's more really getting deep into the technicalities of the product for a new feature we're launching and being a sounding board for our amazing product team. So my role right now is really enabler and individual contributor at a lot of these areas, all while having in the back of my mind this kind of strategic architect role of guiding the business over the short, medium, and long term to where we need to go.
Yeah, 100%. Naturally, your responsibility starts to be transparent more and more as you operate throughout the business. Now, you mentioned you are having to actively participate in a lot of these silos within the business. But what silo do you tend to lean towards, or which one do you prefer that you feel that provides the most value?
Yeah, sales, product, and customer success is the trifecta. So it's like equally weighted across all three of those. I was an engineer, quote unquote, back in the day, but nowhere near where our team is now. So, I built the first version of Digit on not a modern tech stack at all. So that's very much handled by the team. Finance kind of runs itself, post fundraise and all that. We're very disciplined as a firm. But the real value add is sales. So finding customers who are good fits, who our product can materially affect their business outcomes for. It's engaging them in the sales process, getting them closed, shifting immediately into customer success, because the close of the deal is really just the start. For us, it's we want to get you onboarded as quickly as possible, getting value from the company and unlocking a lot of that latent opportunity that exists in a lot of these businesses. So still very heavily involved in that. And then product is the third piece. So as we continue to launch new features at a rapid pace, making sure I can take my consulting and operator experience and say, hey, when we work on this specific feature, can it work for all types of manufacturers? If not, why? Let's fix it so it can, and then enable the product team to do it. So it's those three areas pretty much every day that I'm gravitating towards that I think add the most value to the business.
I would agree. And a lot of people unfortunately don't really understand that sales, marketing, and CSM really are the pillar that actively drives the business forward. And I think that's why I'm so passionate about this particular silo. And like you said, finance runs on its own steam once it's set up correctly, but you don't really need to be in there on a day-to-day basis. Obviously, you need to be aware of things, but other than that, you let the ship sail. So you've spent years working closely with businesses before becoming a SaaS founder. What patterns did you start to notice that ultimately pushed you to build your own product rather than pitching it to some of your clients to build on your behalf?
Yeah, there were a lot. So I referenced the data nickname earlier. I view the world in patterns and data and had seen this over and over again. And the genesis behind this really started with I was really obsessive over the software that I ran into while working for these companies as a consultant and trying to implement or build. And in the software that I was exposed to and trying to implement when I was running the disc golf company. And I just wasn't happy with anything that was on the market. I felt like, on the consumer hardware side of things with the iPhone, for example, and iOS, and this irrational brand loyalty and product loyalty that people had for products that were really beautifully designed and very powerful but appeared simple, that didn't exist in the B2B space. And so I saw this pattern from place to place to place where things were promised, it's off the shelf, you can do it yourself. And then when it actually went to hit the shop floor, you realize that is like, whoever's making these products either A, just does not know about manufacturing or supply chain because there's little things it can't do, or B, they didn't care about the soul of the product. And they would say you can't compete on design. UI and UX matters, but then you look at how they designed it and they very clearly, they might believe it, but they just haven't executed on it. But most of the time they just didn't put any time into it. And so it was really this thing of like, hey, these products aren't doing what they need from a configurability standpoint, and they're not pretty. And it was really that simple. And it was just like, I really believe there should be a beautiful product that people enjoy using while they're at work. That should be able to fit all these different use cases and be configurable by non-technical users. And so that was the core pattern. And it just didn't seem like a lot of software in supply chain specifically bought into that. And so you see more and more of these companies stand up, not follow those things and either fail or just turn into one of the legacy systems. And so that was literally the thing. You hear about founders or entrepreneurs or teams who literally cannot sleep at night. I would I had a little variant of this. I would fall asleep for 15 minutes and then I would wake up wired. So it was this weird thing of like, I would fall asleep, but only 15 minutes. And then I'd wake up wired for hours thinking about the same thing. I'm like, we cannot live in a world where this is the case. Like, let's go and actually build this. And that was the start of Digit.
I think you've hit the nail on the head where their systems are basically as old as dinosaurs. With an industry that was previously untouched, such as manufacturing and logistics, I think a lot of businesses or industries are yet to still experience that pretty product. But so maybe Digit has some areas of expansion, probably using manufacturing and supply as sort of a use case and say, hey, if we can do it in supply and logistics, maybe there's elsewhere that we can look into. So from where you sit today, what major shifts are you seeing in the manufacturing or log tech SaaS landscape at the moment? And how have those changes influenced how you think about growth and product direction specifically for Digit?
Yeah, I think the real answer is there's like 11 things, very detailed things. I think the two or three most important, I think relevant to this conversation are obviously AI is everywhere. And we have, I think what's a little bit of a unique perspective on how AI can be best used from its current state today and how it can actually drive business impact than maybe some most. I think there's some other patterns emerging too in terms of kind of this great unbundling effect that we see where the promise of these super all-in-one systems that do your HR, your marketing, your accounting, your supply chain are kind of unbundling into individual systems of record that allow each department to kind of manage their thing. And then there's a few more that we can get into here in a little bit. I think the first pattern, and obviously the one top of mind for most, is AI. And so people with AI are, AI this, AI that, agentic workflows are a big thing you hear all the time, and trying to figure out what are they actually good for now? What are they not good for now? I think the biggest thing for us that we've seen, and this is inspired a lot by my consulting background and reading a bunch of stuff during that time, is what we think foundational models are exceptionally good at is sitting on top of structured and unstructured data and providing proactive insights to users. Look at how people are using ChatGPT. Look at how they're interacting with AI. They're learning, they're educated, they're asking. And so one of the trends we're seeing is for making these passive legacy systems into proactive systems of action or systems of progress, as we like to say. And so you see a pattern where some of the UI and UX is changing for these systems, but how users expect to learn from and take insights from these systems, I think, is being flipped on its head from a pull model where you have to go into your system and pull data out into a log in and just do what the system tells you model. So that's probably the biggest one. And then the unbundling one too, I think, is a big one where we very intentionally are not going to build a GL and try to replace your accounting core. We're not going to build a HR information system. Those systems are really good. We're not going to replace Salesforce or HubSpot, but we're going to own the entire end-to-end cycle of everything supply chain, and we're going to be the best at it. And so those are probably the two biggest patterns that we're seeing here over the last couple of years.
I mean, a lot of people, I think what AI allows us to actively do is give us those insights, as you said, in a proactive matter, but also what are founders actually doing with the data and with your perspective of attacking it more proactively with those intelligent business insights. It's not a position of waiting for something to happen. It's a position of this is the data we know in order to get from X to Y. Let's just implement it and see what happens, right? Let the data tell us what to do. This reminds me of a conversation on a previous guest where he said he's in data, obviously, but he's like, lots of people and lots of businesses have data, but so what? What are you doing with it? So I like that the perspective has shifted. It's like, hey, this is the data Digit is providing directly to you on a silver platter. Let's go action it. So I really like that change of perspective rather than just having data there and it being super benign and not actually affecting your business in a positive way. As you scale, which metrics or outcomes are you personally most focused on improving, and why those metrics in particular?
Yeah. So this is a very, very important question for a number of reasons, because I think it displays, number one, our view on why we exist, and then number two, on what we view as important to the business. So I think a lot of companies would immediately respond to, things like revenue, all that kind of stuff. That's very important for business to have. But our number one is customer success and enablement. So number one metric as we scale, starting from how quickly can we get you onboarded and live and using the system, is how tangibly is Digit actually affecting the ROI in your business? And so one of the things that we're doing in a product standpoint for this, for example, is having a before Digit, after Digit like line across your key metrics to show and prove to you like, hey, we're affecting outcomes. This isn't a software you pay and use. Like it's materially going to help your business. So the most important metrics for us are customer success related. And is the product getting live quickly? And is it actually moving the needle? Because if we can nail that and get that right, I think a lot of the rest will take care of itself. From there, we then look at a lot of the sales related metrics. So secondary to that is looking at revenue, looking at average contract value, looking at what does this actually mean that so we can become a going concern and invest back into product and back into teams that then all channel back into customer enablement and customer outcomes. So those are the two, as we look over the next year or two, it's a lot of those customer success metrics first, and then it's a lot of those sales and go-to-market metrics second. And other sales and go-to-market metrics will be CAC, lifetime value, all of the stuff you read in the textbooks. We are very data centric. So scorecards, following it all, trending week over week, visibility online, all of those stuff, making sure that they're trending up and to the right is a big deal for us.
You definitely give me the vibe that it is customer and user experience first. And I really love that you're, in essence, kind of flipping it on its head, if I'm honest. And that's because the data then is there presented again right on a silver platter, but then clients and prospects can actually go in there and see the value instantly. So it gives them a reason to stick around and see what else can we really achieve together with Digit. And that's maybe something a lot of founders or platforms or softwares out there that kind of lack. I think a lot of people, at least in the conversations I've had to date, is let's build something, obviously put the idea there, get backed, and then go to market as quickly as possible, feedback loop from the prospects or the beta testers, and then sort of go from there. Whereas you've kind of reverse engineered it and say, okay, we know that this product is good. Let's show them what the value is straight off the cuff. And then obviously that increases your retention late downstream. Looking ahead, Dan, to 6 to 12 months, where did you want Digit to be? And if you had a magic wand to fix just one thing currently slowing or holding the company back, what would that one specific thing be?
Yeah, I think that the magic wand, and this would be amazing if this were true, I think would be being able to build more faster. And so what I mean by that is within our space and with a lot of SaaS products as well, there's one side of the spectrum where you have every feature under the sun. And a lot of legacy ERPs have kind of fallen to that. And there's the other thing where you're building just a single feature and you're very much a niche point solution. And so we're definitely weighted more towards the every feature under the sun, but nowhere close to it. And so because we're kind of de-scoped and in our own supply chain section, we know what our product needs to be. And I think what we've seen is because what we have built with a small team so quickly is having such a big impact on customers, being able to accelerate that more with additional resources to back up our already amazing team so that we could deliver more value quicker for our customers, I think would be the true engine that, again, affects those customer metrics we talked about the quickest. And then being able to, have a product that really just stands completely on its own against products that have been around for 20, 30, even 40 years. So that would be the biggest one. I think from a resource strap startup would be, more in the product. And then things like sales. I would love more sales reps. I would love more CS reps. I would love more all of this, but that to me would be the best, I think, use for the magic wand.
Yeah, 100%. And again, just from the current theme of all of the conversation thus far, you are very heavily focused on the product and sort of more the technical side, being able to deliver so intentfully, not just quickly. And I think that really shows by just looking at the amount of growth that you're able to achieve in such a small time. If you had one piece of advice for Data Dan 10 or 15 years ago, what would you say to younger Dan?
I would say go for it sooner. Go for it much sooner. The original idea for Digit actually came back in 2015. I have a picture on my phone of drawing Digit out on a napkin. So this whole back of a napkin is like very real thing. And I think there was this confidence of like, who am I to go and disrupt legacy ERP? Like that's just a crazy thought. Like in what world is that actually true? And I think as I worked with more and more companies and as I, became a CEO, I realized more and more it's like when you assemble really great teams and you get things like the culture right and you are building something people want and are willing to pay for and you understand the market, anybody in any team can do anything. And I think that took a really long time for me to internalize. And had I just gone for it and essentially jumped off the cliff and built a plane before you hit the ground, I think A lot of what we're building at Digit actually could have been started much earlier.
Yeah, I love that it literally is the back of the napkin type of story, and these are the kind of stories that we love to hear on this podcast specifically because when we look at, Digit on the websites, on LinkedIn, on X, everything is super polished, and I think that's natural. But what this podcast allows you to do is give us that backstory. Why are we building what we're doing, and how are we building what we're building? So I really love your perspective, Dan, and I think there's going to be a lot of lessons in this particular episode. So if anybody's listening, please drop down a message if you've got any questions. But Dan, thank you so much for sharing your journey and your perspective so openly. What really stands out to me is how much leadership and scale can come down to understanding your systems, the industry, not just technology, but people, process, and decision making under pressure. For anyone listening, we will include Dan's details and Digit software in the show notes below. And if you'd like to learn more about what they're building, please keep following along. But thanks for joining us on the SaaS Playbook, Dan.
Thank you so much for having me, Jenny.
It's been a pleasure.